first of all, if you can hear me, then I want to thank you all for joining us here on our webinar for July 2019. This is Teach the Future Global with presentations from our friends to the north of us here in Canada and to the north of some of the other people here. We have a lot of really wonderful people on this call. First of all, again, thank you very much for joining us. Let me introduce our audience today, people who are not part of Teach the Future Canada. We have Lucio Inaho, who is from Colombia, I believe. He is a member of the Teach the Future Colombia or Latin America. So let me call on Janine from South Africa. Janine has done this presentation before. Her presentation is online in our, what is it? Soft group, no, the Drive, OneDrive thing. So Janine, you want to say hello?
Yes, hello everyone. It's Janine here from Cape Town. Yeah, I mean, maybe we can just let you know that we've reached a point where we've registered our NGO. We've done several workshops. We yesterday, I'm pleased to say, held the first introduction session for our first paying workshop. So that was just an introduction to the high school learners, and we will do a full day workshop next month with them. Yeah, so with everything we do, we learn a little bit about what works and what doesn't work, but I'm excited to hear what Germany has can share with us. Hello? Is anyone there?
I'm here.
Yeah, we're here, Janine. Thank you very much for introducing yourself. So let me start, and also Brian Alexander is in the United States. He's a member of the Teach the Future board and has joined us here. He's a podcaster and consultant largely in the area of the future of education. And Brian's been a very great supporter of Teach the Future here in the United States and elsewhere.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much. Great. Well, I thank you, Brian. And so let me introduce our lineup. One person who was going to do the introduction is Amy Hosotsuji, who is kind of the head of the Teach the Future Canada project. Unfortunately, I don't know what may happen, but we always have issues of getting folks on board. So we really have three kinds of presentations here for you all today. One of them has to do with actually teaching the future. So I want to begin with Amanda. Then we'll move to Maggie, who was recognized as a next generation foresight professional by the Society of International Futures. And she's working largely with adults, but also in the areas of training and getting people to think about the future. And then we have four Teach the Future educators on the call. Thomas Mangle is with the University of New Brunswick, I believe, or in New Brunswick somewhere. Jonathan Kaloff is with the University of Ottawa. Michael Rostak is with a number of universities, most recently the Royal Military College. And Alex Wilner is with Carleton University in the UK. I'm sorry, in Ottawa. So that's our kind of lineup: Amanda, Maggie, and then the four foresight educators. We've got an hour or so. We're going to ask folks to be complete but brief and give everybody a sense of what it is. The other people listening in, it's great to have them, but we also record this and then we put out the recording for anyone else who wants to hear about it. So I'm going to, since I can't hear anyone, I'm going to let Paul call on people as time goes on. If you have a PowerPoint, you can share your screen by mousing over the bottom of the screen again, and there's a share button, and it will bring up a screen that has a lot of your windows open. Choose the window where your PowerPoint is, and then just work through it as you go along. PowerPoint is not necessary, however, it's optional. And I'm sure we'll get a lot of information if you just tell us what you've been doing and how you're introducing the future there in Canada. So Paul, do you want to take over since I can't hear anybody and do the introductions? Amanda, Maggie, and then the four folks from Foresight Educators. Okay? So Paul, take it over.
Sure. I'm Paul Malecki with Teach the Future in America, helping Dr. Bishop get this effort some legs. Amanda, are you there, and are you prepared to start the first presentation?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Thanks. How much time do I have? Could you just give me a little bit of a heads up? I could use some help in that department for brevity.
15 minutes maybe, since we have 3.
15 minutes or so? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to share here. And if you can let me know if it's coming through.
Yes, can see it very clearly.
Okay, super. Okay, so I am Amanda Dervatis. I am in Toronto, as Peter mentioned. I'm really happy to be part of Teach the Future Canada. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that I'm doing here at my school. I'm founder and director of Summit Micro School. And so we've started working with the future thinking. And what I want to talk about today specifically is how we're kind of looking at fostering a future thinking mindset, working with elementary students. So as mentioned, we're here in Toronto and we are a micro school. So that's it. What you see in the bottom of your screen there, that's our entire school this year. So we are very, very micro. So we're K-8, we're integrated. We have like mixed classes and we're an alternative and independent school, which means we get to do some very cool things like create our own curriculum and be innovative with our curriculum, which is what I'm very interested in. So looking forward, the future of education is something I'm passionate about, and you know, being modern and innovative, which is one of the reasons why I've started the school. And so a little bit more about our programs. We do project-based and inquiry learning predominantly, and our skills focus, or our focus of our curriculum rather, is on skills and the competencies, and really providing a foundation for students to be, you know, strong learners for the future and to be prepared for the future. So rather than a model of standardized tests and working towards just a standard, we do individualized programs, and so it's all about growth for each individual student. So lots of hands-on, lots of hands-on, lots of experiential. So okay, sorry, it looks like this slide is a little bit messed up. Sorry about that. I'll fix that after. But we look at mindset. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the concept of mindset, the growth mindset, of course, made popular by Carol Dweck at Stanford. And so we do a lot of that, incorporate and work on fostering a growth mindset as part of kind of underlying with, you know, throughout and integrated through the whole program, as well as entrepreneurial mindset, which is something that is a little bit, not necessarily new, but we kind of went about it backwards and realized that we were kind of working on entrepreneurial mindset as well. And I've been starting to do some work with some folks at UPenn who are working on entrepreneurial mindset and some pretty exciting things. So I'm excited about that. But then this is where I feel that the futures thinking really comes into play, and why having it, working it in at an elementary level is so important, because of course it gives us that that different lens of how we move forward and view everything. This partially came about from some of my own experiences as well. I actually came to know Teach the Future through my involvement with the World Future Society, and so becoming more involved with that, I began to realize that it really started to really shape the way that I began to view things in my own life and my own experiences and opportunities. So looking at foresight skills and practices and developing them, over time and slowly through experiences and through reflection, and so that's what I'm looking at in terms of really working the futures thinking into our program, is that it's going to be woven in throughout the program in various ways and over time as part of our underlying curriculum objectives. And then hopefully it will help students to have a greater capacity for developing those more advanced foresight skills in the future. And then the last point here of what really started this was, and me thinking about a future thinking mindset, is this sense of hope. And this is something that in my own work with adolescents that I've noticed that this is a kind of startling trend. I don't think that it's unique here, but our students are, bombarded with, so many messages from media and, through social media and various networks. And so I've seen in my students over the last, even couple of years where this sense of doom and gloom and hopelessness is setting in, and a lot more anxiety. So again, noticing that my own experiences with futures thinking and foresight and how that helped me to have a more positive outlook and to be motivated to take action, to help shape the future. That's was one of the motivators here. Okay, sorry about that. So really, we want where our starting point is looking at seeing that students are going to be able to have a more positive, on top of all of the other things, that those will take a lot of time and will develop over a period of time, but looking at this idea of giving them some hope. So we want to look at integrating the futures thinking. This is how I started working on this unit. This was our first unit. Here you see Peter is actually here in this slide in our school. We were fortunate to have him visit us on Futures Day, and he did a workshop with the kids. So that was pretty cool. That was their first introduction. So we started this unit. It was our last project-based theme unit of the year this past spring. So I was looking at, this is our first attempt, our first go at it, integrating the futures thinking into our PBL framework that we already use. I wanted to see the student engagement with the futures thinking materials and concepts, looking at challenges for students and teachers, of course, just that constant formative assessment, like you said, Janine, always looking at what you can always having something to learn, see what you can improve on moving forward. So that's always a part of what we do. And then looking at that hope piece and that positivity, and then looking at what our next steps would be. Okay, how am I for time here?
Doing just fine.
Okay. So looking at our existing PBL model, we do work with a couple of different frameworks, but this one we're working with the 6 Ds, and it's through an organization called Wabi-Sabi Learning, that's out of Vancouver, I believe. And so the 6 Ds, they follow a lot of it's the design process, so it's our project process, but the design process and the scientific method, you can match up all of those processes with this, and then looking at the futures thinking, because of course that's what we're starting with, because those are excellent materials. So, which is awesome that we had that base to start with. But so our process of define, discover, dream, design, deliver, and debrief matches up nicely with the define, gather, imagine, and reflect of the futures thinking. So we have, our unit was Planet Earth, and so that's a recurring unit that we do every year. This year our focus was on water. Again, this is integrated, it is integrated curriculum, and it's mixed grades. So this one was done predominantly parts with all of K to 8, and then for the story reading portion was done grades 4 to 8. And again, looking at what I really, going a little bit deeper into that hope piece with this unit. One of the challenges that we've had in the past has been going deep with our environmental and Planet Earth units, because if we go deep and really look at some of the issues, with with a realistic lens, I would say, not, kind of sheltering and holding back on some of the important information, we end up just causing so much fear and instilling more anxiety into the kids. And so we've stepped back from that and done more of a surface look at some of the issues. And then what that does, I find, is you get that engagement for the unit, but nothing sticks moving forward. Then it doesn't really seem to have any real impact. So we can feel good about what we're doing at the time, but we're looking at teaching these kids, again, skills, concepts, knowledge, everything that they will take with them, and we want it to be meaningful and impact their lives. So this was one of the goals. So we're looking at the Planet Earth unit here, and our driving question that we started with is, how can we use stories to teach and influence others so that we can achieve our preferred future of water? So we always start with the driving question. That one's, you can see it's pretty loaded, and it gives us a lot to deconstruct. And that's exactly what we want, so that we can dive into a lot of different topics and concepts. Okay, so we always start with, we have our kind of project map that outlines everything that we are working on. All of the, we have our essential questions and our inquiry, our global competencies and 21st century skills, all of the curriculum content, our learning skills, and of course that all is done to lead to our final project, or what we call our artifact. And so the futures thinking component was really woven in. We had an opportunity to mix it in all these different ways. So it wasn't necessarily done sequentially as it would be through a workshop, the way that it is set up, but we wove it in through the curriculum, through all of the other content and skill and concept development as well. So this was lots of science, lots of social studies as well, and a large language arts component with the storytelling as well. And so this was it ended up being, we added on a week because the students really got into their research. And so we gave them more time. We can be a little bit flexible with that. So it ended up being about six weeks, planned to be 5, but we did it for 6 weeks. And the final artifact was a story. The students were writing stories from the future. And so it was meant to impact or have some kind of influence to help teach us about what we can do to reach our preferred future, to achieve that preferred future of water. So lots of different angles that the kids took with this. We used
About 5 more minutes, if you don't mind, Amanda.
5 minutes.
5.
Okay, thanks. So we used the Futures Thinking Playbook. We used a lot of lessons from the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup. That was our huge science component, watershed systems, etc. And then the lots of different language arts, story writing, and development there. So again, starting with this driving question, this really led to a lot of deep inquiry. Besides the inquiry that we already anticipated, the essential questions, this allowed the kids to dig into, well, what do you mean the future? What is a preferred future? And how can we tell the future of water? Why do we need to know the future? So we always start with that dive there. Going to define incorporating the futures. I'll just run through now really quickly some of the things that we did. We did revisit what we had done with Peter with how we view the future and the different perspectives. That's play 1. Then we took some time, part of the discovery phase. We did the science, the art, the storytelling. So in the meantime, we did service learning through the shoreline cleanup. There we are. We're on the Humber River system here in Toronto, and then getting really back deep into the futures. So starting with that defining, with the digging deep into the driving question, all of the other work that's done through all of the other concepts, then this is the futures is always kind of there. We continuously bring it up, so that lens, the students are always kind of thinking about that. And then we dove deep. And so the kids got to look at choose their topics and do their in-depth research, and we supported them with that. We did the trend studies, and then getting into imagining the futures and the what if and the preferred and etc. And the kids developed their stories. Now this was really cool because what the kids ended up working on really reflected what's important in project-based learning, which is voice and choice, and this allowed them to do this. Some of the topics were very broad, looking at pollution of the oceans, or like the great the Great Garbage Patch. We had students get really specific. My son looked at the disappearance of the Aral Sea in particular. And so water bottles, people looked at corporate business involvement with owning water, like just almost everything, which was so awesome. So we got lots of different perspectives. We spent a lot of time doing this piece of doing the story circle and sharing the stories, which was hugely successful, I would say. And then so right back to where we're looking at with the objectives, right off the bat I could see that it was helpful, and we were talking about it a lot, about this idea of hope. Kids were scared. We coached them through looking at with the futures perspective when they were doing their research and starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed. We were able to bring them back, so that was really helpful. And overall, for the next in reflecting with the students and getting their feedback and just getting a general sense, we were able to see that the students were able to dive deeper and in a really meaningful way into these issues, and they walked away with agency and a sense of hope rather than fear and anxiety. So there you go. 15, 20 minutes or less. There you go. And I'm really excited to keep, this is obviously just the beginning. So really, really excited to keep moving forward with this.
Excellent, Amanda. You timed it really well. You got to your last slide within the time. And we did have Michael who chatted in a question. Can we take a minute to handle that one? Do you see that, or shall I read it, Amanda?
Sorry, I just lost my question window.
Okay, I'll read it to you. So Michael asks, curious as to how receptive the students were to the future's thinking.
Yeah, so this is where in doing in moving forward and looking at what the challenges were, really looking at it from an elementary perspective. I want to develop, you know, how to scaffold the concepts. So the different perspectives were a little bit difficult for the students to really wrap their heads around. And so we would definitely do a lot more work with that. So that was a challenge, but developmentally perspective taking is something that is developing, that isn't quite there yet at this point. So I really see it as an opportunity as well, because we do look at that perspective taking, that we would use the future perspectives as a way of, as just like another tool of developing that perspective taking, and another way of helping them to see different perspectives. And then also with looking at the trends, that was a little bit, I mean, that takes time. That's really deep. So moving forward with that, I would like to incorporate a more teacher-directed trend study with all of the different units. So whether it's, we've got, you know, a technology unit, or you know, any of the various things that we have, the environment, but so any of the themes and the units we have, that they would do that. So, but that's part of it, is figuring out developmentally what they're kind of ready for, and starting to scaffold and build up some of those concepts.
Excellent. Thank you again. Well done, Amanda. And we can follow up with email or other things later on, or one-on-one. Good job. We appreciate it. Maggie, can you go next and get through it in about 15 minutes?
Sure. Happy to. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on. This is an incredible opportunity to hear what Amanda is doing, first of all, and also to put a call out to for, you know, participation and support in Making the Futures Present, which is the project that I started developing about 3 years ago now. It came out of my OCAD Masters of Design and Strategic Foresight. And to roll back, I was a theater designer for 10 years. And I went from there into advertising and interaction and the innovation space. And parallels is that in theater design, you're watching people move all the time. They're picking up objects, they're moving through spaces, and they're expressing themselves. Same thing in advertising and interactive social communities. There's a lot of storytelling involved. So when we jump to futures, I've found it to be extraordinarily easy to envision using objects and business models and activities and scenarios and artifacts to help people to see the future or understand the future. So what I'll do is I'll show you a little bit of the process that I developed as a workshop, as the first out of the gate. The goal is to ask to present a concept of if the future wasn't predetermined, would you want it to be that way? So it's very, very, very simple, like a general first brush with foresight thinking, multiple futures thinking, and so on. So my approach with my work and working with kids and adults and potential clients is to just expose them to foresight futures as a potential way to get a little bit of agency over the future. So without further ado, please stop me if I'm rambling on something or missing some details and you want to ask questions. First, I'm going to share screen. There is a, sorry, can you talk me through how to do that?
Sure. Do you have, on the bottom of your screen, do you have a button that says share? It's a kind of square with an arrow
Yep.
in it.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Now it's happening. Whoa!
It's all there. Okay. So I don't know how chaotic this looks. Sorry about that. So the project is called Making the Futures Present, and it's really stressing using creativity and your hands and physical memory to create a story. We've got the workshop, myself and my business partner, David Buwalda of Futures Present. We have the workshop down to an hour and a half. We work with people of all ages and curiosities who are buying into the concept of what if things could be different. So in the beginning, we welcome them into a safe place and use 3 rules. And with every iteration of this, this workshop and engagements and so on, we're refining the language a little bit. So I haven't released this, this document as something sort of widely for people to work with themselves because I'm at that phase right now where we're looking for partners to really learn from. So the 3 rules at the moment are talking is low risk. So you can say something, you can tell a story. It's okay to talk about your expectations because we hold you in a place where you're not an expert. Your expectations are true to you. So we can't, that's the low risk part. It's kind of role playing or in your mind what might happen. The second is there are no facts about the future. And this particular law or rule tends to open up a lot of comfort zone for people, especially kids. The tools you have the tools within you to grow and thrive is the third one. And I worked with some kids from Regent Park, which is a low-income neighborhood, very diverse newcomers to Canada neighborhood. And they, one of the kids there, it really helps them to sort of get past the violence and the drug problems and the domestic abuse and so on, to get to believing that the future will be okay for them. So after they're in a safe space, we've created that, we offer them a chance to imagine the city of the future. And with kids, we found that going to 50 years is actually a really much easier opportunity than to do that through 20 years as an example, because it is just so far out of what they conceive, and it's a lot more fun to do that than to try to pin it to some sense of reality. Oops. Over the course of the next hour, we ask questions that help them to author multiple different futures, such as what are the greatest outcomes that could happen? And we spend about 15-20 minutes to cultivate a story, whether it's with an individual or with a group, about what could happen in the best possible scenario. Then we kind of, sorry about the sound in the background. Then we sort of parking lot that, and then we say what's not likely to happen. And this is a place where they can make some sweeping generalizations as well. And then the third is, what do you think is inevitable? And with each one of these, their descriptions are nuanced and modified when I ask them for an example of what do you know of that today? What is something that you, what's the trigger for you? And so they drop down from a place of generalization to the nuances of facts. There is no black and white. This particular event is not going to happen to everybody. They start to think about innovation as happening at different timescales. And then from there, we collect things that inspire them within each sort of narrative that they've authored. We name it. And again, with every step here, we are distilling it down from big sort of sweeping visions of the futures to something that could happen. And finally, we ask them to think about a particular situation in one of those futures and to close their eyes using, sort of theatrical techniques of thinking about their senses. What do they smell? What's the light like? Are they inside? Who are they with? What do they hear? To make a tool that can help them on that day, 50 years into the future. So just to show this again, the today's date plus 50 years, that level of granularity and nuance actually helps them to understand that there are some things that will be consistent, such as, most hypothetically, the sun will rise and set at roughly the same time as it does today, July 12th, 2069, that gravity will still exist, that some of the buildings looking out the window might be there in the same, rough iteration that they're in now. So that's the process. And then at the end, we say, here's a postcard. Write to yourself from that 50 years ahead place to where you are today, and share what it is that the first step it is that you can do to get into this preferred future. And so here's an example of when a 16-year-old girl in Regent Park, she had come in for an after-school workshop, and she wrote to herself and said, "Hey, it's me. To prepare for the future, the first thing I did was I went to business school, and in 2 years got an offer for my dream job, becoming a financial analyst, making my past few years successful, as well as my home life, and wrote a successful book as well." So they end up with multiple different engagements with telling a story, then building a piece in that story, and then writing about it. And each time they sift through again and again and again what it might feel like or look like to be in that future. So just a quick check on time. How much time do I have left? Because I want to show some
About 50 more minutes or so, if possible.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. So where I am now, I've trained a whole bunch of facilitators. First of all, students who are at the graduate level who wanted to understand what it's like to prototype the future using creative pieces. They then took that and turned it into a game. I've been working with a woman who is early 20s, and she's doing a criminal psychology college program, and she's working with youth in a shelter type environment, community center in downtown Toronto. Then two sisters, and they co-wrote the script with me. These two sisters are 16 and 17, and the postcard that I showed you is actually from the workshop that they were teaching other kids how to think about the future too. So this lovely chain of easy techniques that are tactile, that are visual. And I will just show you a quick example of what this looks like with adults. Instead of using Lego and so on, I'm using different raw materials because they evoke a little less structure, the world and organic things. here's a design fiction object, one which came out of a workshop with a woman who had, she was thinking about a future for her where time was her own. So using design fiction, I created nail polish that changed color when she was in the right attitude to be productive, and another color when it was time to sort of bring it in and not do any work. And then one more example I just wanted to show you. This is not mine, but graphic novels as an example. So the visual medium is tremendously powerful. I have an ask to the community at large, which is to help. I think it's such an easy thing for people to relate to on that integral other ways of knowing format. And we all consume content in multiple different ways, and we all have different, I guess, timelines in which we take in ideas in different formats. So my ask is to help reach 7 million people, which is just, for starters, it's a 0.1% of the people on the planet now, with multiple different modes of communication, whether it's books or interactive or games or whatever, to translate this type of structure with authoring and agency to something physical in different media. So I'm a designer. I'm a designer and a futurist, and I want to be able to get different formats, different language, different audiences as much as possible. So please use me if you have, if you want to just give that very first pass of what thinking about the futures might be like. And I want to help you to adapt it to your audience. And together, I think that we might be able to fast track some of these thick concepts into very small nuggets of inspiration.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Maggie. Well done. Really like the show and tell. You've got some great materials there. And thanks for your ask. It's always good to promote and nudge us and see how we can do things together. And it was timely and well put together. Can we move now to the third presentation of Jonathan Thomas Michael? And if Alex is here as well, please.
Who do you want to start?
However you guys put it together, Jonathan's at the top of the list for whatever reason.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I mean, we didn't put it together, nor did we coordinate it.
So if we've got, can we do 5 minutes each?
Absolutely.
If we do 5, okay, let's go ahead.
All right. I'm the odd duck here, so I'll go first so that when the rest go, it makes more sense. I come at this a slightly different way. So I'm a prof at University of Ottawa, but I'm also a leading research fellow in Russia, prof in South Africa, and also adjunct with UNB. So for the UNB gang here, I'm actually in Montreal right now at a startup festival with 12 startup companies of university students at a startup festival, which has lots of speakers talking about the future so that when they have their business plans, it reflects what's coming up. That gives you a little bit of an idea in terms of what's going on. Now, as I try to, can you all see my presentation?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Can you still see it? That's good. Conceptually at Telfra, what we've done, I've done, my friends have done, is we've integrated this concept of futures thinking, short, medium, long-term environmental understanding, starting in 2001 with the development of a competitive intelligence seminar at the MBA level. In 2009, we added a foresight module. In 2012, I don't know if you guys know Jack Smith, but he was our chief foresight officer for Canada. And after that, John Ross, who does foresight with DND, were brought in to give the students the longer term view, especially when applied to technology related projects. Greg Richards, who runs our analytics program, was then brought in because the idea is there's a variety of analytical techniques across the 3 domains that are necessary for understanding the future. This is certainly true in terms of what we've seen with the European network. Due to, we'll call it popular demand, we were forced to do an undergraduate course, I'm happy to say, which in 2017 was a specialized course. We expected about 10 students to sign up, 120 did. Created a bit of a problem, so now we have 3 sections, including 1 in French. Now, what's important to me as I deal with my students, preparing them for their future, I teamed up with strategic competitive intelligence professionals. So when my students do the course, they can write an exam that says they have entry knowledge in the profession, and Voice of the Business Academy, which gives them another certificate, lots of online training and online materials. We've tried to integrate the ecosystem in terms of what we do, as well as integrating the futures thinking in many different courses in different ways. So the line here is pass to space. I'm a soccer coach, skate to where the puck will be. The idea is to always say, where are things going? Because the business plans that you're working on today don't come to fruition for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You got to have a sense as to where things are going. Also open up to possibilities. Let's start off at the bottom, the complex project management. This is a new degree that we're offering. These are 25-year and longer billion-dollar projects that you see with military companies, that you see with the government as well. And they're trying to do a plan right now, getting the money, locking into procedures. So we're teaching them scenarios. We're dealing with alternative futures. We're dealing with probably about 12 different analytical techniques to help them deal with the complexity, as well as, by the way, stakeholder analysis. I've already mentioned a bit about the MBA. Clearly, we have a competitive intelligence course integrating foresight, but it's also integrated within the strategy course itself, PESTL's multinational business course, and there's a seminar on competitive intelligence within the executive MBA program. Undergraduate, as I mentioned, we do have the competitive intelligence course with foresight module, as well as within the business strategy course, a module on foresight, once again, so they'll understand where things are going. And then finally, because we're a university, we're trying to integrate the ecosystem in all of this. We've done it in 2 exciting ways. We created the Foresight Synergy Network, which is the Ottawa ecosystem of foresight that meets once a month at the university to chat about what they're doing. We hear from speakers. Last week, Rial Miller was in town from UNESCO. So we had a really great couple-hour session with him where we had probably 6 or 7 heads of government foresight units. We had a couple of professors, students. In all, we had about 40 people registered, which when you're talking about July 4th, summer, nobody around is not bad. We've also had demand from the assistant deputy ministers and deputy ministers for a program for them as well, dealing with future thinking, future literacy, which is what Rial really deals with. Now, at the executive level and consulting, because again, that's at a personal level as well as at the university level, we are doing the Market Insight program with companies throughout North America, around the world. This actually here, under the auspices of UNB, is combining market insight as well as what's called event intelligence. So how do you make sense of the information at the program that you're at? Who do you talk to? What do you ask them? How do you network more effectively? How do you get people together over alcohol and non-alcohol substances? We have some very interesting discussions that are allowing the students to envision where the industry could be going that they're trying to work towards. And then finally, I think the program I like the best is the Community Economic Development Program. So I'm going to end with that one. The idea of that was to say, rather than having your economic development being thrust upon you by the government or other authorities, or having to hire a consultant, do it yourself. It's called Control Your Destiny, or Somebody Else Will. The first step was teaching future thinking to the community leaders. And the idea, we do this in smaller communities. You have the mayor, you have the heads of industry, you have, you go down the list, there's about 30, 40 people over a multi-month period. And the idea is to say, well, your community's dying. Let's stop doing what you did in the past, because they keep arguing, and that's the way my grandfather did it, and look at where you're going towards the future. And the first step is, what is that vision of the future? A variety of techniques for that. Then you try to identify the community's competitive advantage. So as you seek to go towards that future, what have you got that people care about? And that's where you start getting into strategy analytical techniques as well as, you know, competitive intelligence. What are the main issues involved in making that future vision happen? Develop the action plan, and then you present it to the larger community. And that's always a lot of fun when you have the community leaders who have spent many months developing this, talking to the community about where they want to take them towards the future and how it will happen. One of the places we did it, which is both happy and sad, was Humboldt, Saskatchewan. And so I took it it was very painful to me with what happened to the hockey team, because I know many of the people there. And so the idea was to help them for their future, because they were losing their kids, they were losing their businesses. It was not a happy scene. Very happy to say that phase 2 of the program did not happen because they said they're far too busy because of what they're doing with phase 1 to worry about phase 2 in terms of when we made it happen. So that's kind of a look at what we've been trying to do to students, short, medium, long-term visioning, to executives, to communities, to government to develop that thought. And so as we try to deal with it even at a research level, you'll see a lot of activity that I'm doing under the auspices of the university, including research projects. We're in the middle now of critical success factor analysis of foresight. This is being done with government foresight practitioners and me working together, a global intelligence program, then a whole bunch of editorial stuff, which allows me as a university professor to be connected to the larger world to find out what they're doing. And that's what's been kind of neat from the perspective of the editorial. Lastly, in terms of the international involvements, we have somebody from South Africa on the line. I'll be in South Africa second week of August because we're working on the futures thinking with the Innovation Ministry, and we're working on it with a couple of universities as well. So Northwest University made me an extraordinary professor so I could tackle it from a local perspective. The Moscow, I'll be first week of August. The Russians are integrating long-term thinking in policy development. We did $5 billion in nanotechnology recommendations. The university offers a program, a degree in foresight, which includes a corporate foresight course. Foresight and intelligence is integrated in the strategy course as well. So a lot of activity going on that I'm really happy to share with you guys. Not quite in the futurist world as the society might describe it, not quite in the foresight world as they would describe it, not quite in the competitive intelligence world. Instead, what we've done is we've combined it all and said multiple approaches, multiple views required to understand how to establish strategy and also why you need that long-term orientation and future thinking. So there you go, the view of my world in 6 slides. Copies available in the articles I mentioned. You can just email me. Happy to send you.
Excellent job. Thank you very much. Jonathan, that was great. Who's next? Thomas, Michael, or Alex?
I can go next. I'm fine.
Very good. Please, about 5 minutes or so. We started a little late. If everyone's willing to stay around a little longer, then we can get everyone in. But if we can do these final presentations in about 5 minutes or so, that would be great. Please, go ahead.
Okay, so hi again. I'm Thomas, and I'm teaching at the University of New Brunswick since 2005. Before that, I was a consultant and in practice in management and leadership, both in Germany, that's where I'm originally from, and now in Canada. So, and I don't know how my slide moves forward. It doesn't. I'm sharing, but I'm not moving it. It's stuck with that one slide. I don't know why that is. Okay. So my connection to futures thinking is that teaching leadership, I discovered that the field of leadership and leadership education and development very much is focused on models of the past and seems to often paddle backwards, looking at older models and models that have been successful in the past and solving problems off and adapting to present problems, which often is called, or by Sharma is called, modeling through. So about 2 years ago, I started to think about, what might a leadership model for and from the future look like, and I started to dig deeper into the literature, did some exploratory research, and of course, I came across the various associations, WFS, WFSF, and APF, which I all became a member of, and got in contact with Teach the Future and Peter Bishop, who became an important mentor of mine. And with his help, I started to review my courses, my leadership courses, to make them more future-oriented. That is an ongoing activity. In Turku at the conference just a couple of weeks ago, I was presenting and discussing how you're constructing meaningful futures together, what that would look like. And that, of course, is directly correlated with my teaching here at UNB. And I'm right now preparing for a presentation in Mexico City, which I call From Earth to Mars and Back, where I'm looking at leadership models and how they might be inspired, correlated, corroborated by science fiction.
Tom,
so more
can
to
I
the point in terms of, sure.
We're not seeing your screens. If you've done the share, for some reason it's not coming through on anyone's monitors. If you can try that again.
I don't know what I need to do, because it says to me I'm sharing. And the only option I have is to stop share.
Okay. That should suffice, but apparently it's not working. So if you want to go on with just audio, that's fine.
Oh, that's
Sorry.
unfortunate, but I can of course share the slides. So it looks to me just like every other presentation before, as if I'm seeing my slides and then the rest of it. And as I said, I can just stop sharing. But okay, I'll just keep going.
Thomas,
yeah.
I have a message on my screen that says double click to enter full screen mode. Oh, okay.
To what?
Sorry. No, just a double click, but I don't know. I thought it was a sharing instruction. Not to worry.
No. If I double click, it just keeps going on with my presentation. But if you don't see it, I don't think we have the time to try to fix that now. So I'm basically involved with teaching 2 interdisciplinary leadership programs at RC. One is the Bachelor of Integrated Studies, which is basically a degree completion program, and the other one, and it's mostly done online, and the other one is the Bachelor of Philosophy and Leadership, which is a leadership major with any kind of minor at UNB or elsewhere. Under Peter Bishop's guidance, I've added futures perspectives, in particular personal futures perspectives, to a foundational BIS leadership portfolio course, which is a learning portfolio course where learners document their learning in regard to leadership. And this particular one was a really interesting one, and so I've tried to write up the results, the review and the results of that, and it was actually just published in the World Futures Review magazine journal as an article of a special issue about evaluation. So I'm excited about that, and I certainly have Peter to thank for the opportunity. And then over the next couple of months of this year, and I was glad to have a sabbatical to be able to do that, I added Leadership for the Futures section to a Leadership Foundations course, which I taught in the winter of 2019 and piloted it. And I also added futures perspectives around the 4 futures models by Dater, the scenario technique, which has been presented and developed by various people, and yeah, that's basically the major focus of that. And I've also used those perspectives in the latest course, which I'm still teaching in week 11 now, of a BIS community project management course, which is running right now. that really is sort of where the first couple of steps. I'm currently preparing those futures perspectives that I've done in the BS program for the other program that I will start teaching again after my sabbatical in the fall of 2019. And I'm preparing various presentations coming out of that experience. So I'll stop it at that. And I'm happy to engage in further discussions here and later on. Sorry for the slides not working. I will still hit stop share.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Thomas. Folks, we're over time and Brian had to log off. I'm willing to stay on and have it recorded until everyone's had their say, unless no one else can stay. Michael, do you want to take a few minutes?
I can speak very quickly, if you wish. Let me just pull up the, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so thanks everybody. My name is Alex Wilner. I'm an assistant prof at the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs here in Ottawa at Carleton University. NIPSIA is Canada's preeminent international affairs department. We train graduate students, so something like 230 masters and 30 or 40 PhDs in any given cycle. And many of our graduate students would like to go on into public service, mostly here in Ottawa with the federal public service, but also with the security and intelligence community, and some end up in the military. I joined the faculty about 5 years ago after having worked at Policy Horizons Canada, where I conducted Foresight. Policy Horizons Canada is the federal government's flagship Foresight laboratory. And so I was part of the geostrategic cluster. And so when I joined the Norman Patterson School, I was asked to establish the strategic foresight class for international security. And so besides teaching classes on terrorism and radicalization and intelligence, the strategic foresight class that I'm running now is really meant to provide students with a kind of policy-oriented foresight to try to teach them the tools and techniques that are used at Horizons and at other federal departments, both in Canada and abroad, in thinking creatively about future considerations, future challenges, future concerns, opportunities, and so forth. So it's very much foresight meant to inform the policy cycle, usually in the research phase of policy development. We're trying to anticipate future considerations. Because my class and because of the department really is international affairs, the large focus of the class itself is on the future of cybersecurity, weaponry, intelligence, crime, criminal activity, and so forth. It's kind of the sharp end of international affairs. I think that about 20% of the class is on theory, some of the foundational thinking, alternatives thinking or steep V categories, those kind of things, systems thinking. But 80% of the class is really very practical and hands-on. And so we have a scanning roundtable. I teach them influence diagramming and cascading and futures wheel and scenarios planning and different analytic skills that they need. The class itself really is a 3-hour seminar. It's 12 weeks, it's 1 semester, and it's capped at about 20 students. So it's a very small, well, all of our classes are capped at 20, but it's a small group, very attentive, usually masters, some PhD students who have a diverse background in political science, anthropology, journalism, some scientists in other fields as well. I think what's really worked rather well is that in those 12 modules, I establish usually 4 to 5 clusters, research clusters of students that are grouped into 4 or 5 groups, and they are told to dedicate an entire semester to applying the tools that we learn in class to a foresight project. So they basically spend the semester not only learning the tools, but actually doing the tools. And so what some of the things you can see here on the right here are some of the tools that we're applying, right? Futures wheel, scenario construction, influence diagram, etc. And they're told to do that on a specific future of security consideration. So future of cyber, for instance. This works really well. I think partly is that it's group learning and they're learning by doing. And so I know experiential learning has come up. It's kind of the flavor of the month, but really it's hands-on learning. They're doing the work in class, which is distinct from a traditional master's degree program. The other thing is, having worked in government and very well familiar with the foresight community in Ottawa, I've built deep ties with the class and federal partners. So in each semester, we take the students, all 20 of them, to Policy Horizons Canada's headquarters, and the students present some of their scanning material to the group. And then Foresight practitioners from Global Affairs, which is our State Department, right? NRCan, CSE, CSIS, and other intelligence community, Bank of Canada, RCMP, etc. These practitioners come to class usually more than once and sit in as expert practitioners. And so students are engaged in Foresight with the practitioners. And I think the result, obviously, in the last 4 to 5 years here, is that students end up getting jobs, not only at Policy Horizons Canada, but also at other departments doing Foresight. And so to me, I see that as a victory. Not only is the class especially popular, so the teaching evaluations are great, but I think they're actually learning the tools they need to actually do policy foresight in government. I think where I think there's still work to be done is that not a lot of my colleagues really understand what foresight is. I try not to use the F word, futurists. I try to stick to strategic foresight. I think that gains better traction with them. But there's a sense that, you know, we're a political science heavy international affairs disciplinary focus. So we've got qualitative and quantitative methodologies, and foresight doesn't necessarily fit in. So some of those conversations are a bit wonky. I don't know if maybe John or others in university settings have found that, but often I feel like I'm doing this a little bit in the dark. Great support because it's popular with students, but again, I don't have a sense that some of my colleagues really understand what I'm up to with foresight. That's it for me. Thank you.
Excellent job. Thanks a lot, Alex. Do we have the fourth presenter with us?
That would be me.
Michael, please go right ahead. We are over time, but we're allowing you guys about 5 minutes or so.
There, now I can share.
I see it.
All right, I will be quick. Thank you, everybody, for great presentations so far. Rostek, I come from Foresight from a military background. I got my start back in about 2005, 2006, when I went into an Army Warfare Center and was asked to prosecute a future, look over the horizon at issues, and that's where I first met Peter Bishop. He was my first instructor in Foresight, and we've had a great relationship. He's been a mentor of mine ever since. And I've been pursuing Foresight since that time. So I went into, in 2014, I left the regular Army and then went into academia. I was hired at UOIT to set up a Foresight Center called the Futures Forum. They didn't have a name of it. I called it the Futures Forum. And from there, I really looked at the future of post-secondary education globally and also what it meant for the university. That university was University of Ontario Institute of Technology. It was a new university. They were only, at that time, they were only about 8 years old. They'd had tremendous great success, and they wanted to know what was over the horizon for them. They are now actually called Ontario Tech University. So anything you see on my slide with my logo is really from the past. And so I just want to talk about that experience and trying to set that up based on my experience in the center itself. So I had a very quick mandate. I had a mandate that it was a 3-year mandate. There was no guarantee that this was going to go any further than that. And basically, focused, and they wanted to use the forum to actually as sort of like a platform or a foundation to look over the horizon and make a number of issues, take on a number of public policy issues and perspectives and see what they meant for the university themselves, because they really didn't know which way they were heading because they were still so new. So it was really a unique opportunity for me, and I really enjoyed the interaction. I worked directly for the president of the university, and then I worked with the provost, the president, and the VP research on the, they were my steering committee. And so I was presenting to them routinely, and I was meeting with the president about every 2 weeks. So it was quite an interesting opportunity, mine to develop. And so when I took on that role, I took on it to actually institute or build in a foresight capability for the university itself with a term in terms of keeping it, anchoring it in the university for the longer term. So what I did, how did I do that? I actually started off with a Foresight project. I developed a charter. I went through that charter with them and worked away and then gave it the process that they needed to look further in the future. Of course, I drove the process itself, working with the board of directors and also the senior leadership team. So one of the key things that we established was an annual Futures Forum program where we took the strategic research objectives of the university and then turned them into a Futures Forum as a way of looking over the horizon of where we might go. And so the first one was, the first Futures Forum was on advanced manufacturing. The second one was on smart communities. And the third one was on community mental health and wellness. And so I took a futures prospect for each one of those research items, which were all in our strategic mandate agreement and our strategic research priorities. I wrote a futures paper on each one of those, a working paper, and that established the foundation for the forum, whether it was 2 or 3 days. We had tremendous success with our last one on mental health and wellness, just because it was such a topical issue at the time. And that's going to be turned into a journal article, a special edition of the Journal of Military and Veterans Health Research. And that should be out in January. I also developed an executive education program. I ran the first session with the board of directors or the board of governors for the university and had tremendous success. One of the interesting things when we were summing up is each one of the members actually said that I scared them. And I hope, and I made reinforce the fact that, okay, if I scared you, hope it's in a positive way, it's a positive to action and not one into the sense that they were very much aware and they were very, very supportive. And so I kind of take, sort of credit for opening their eyes to a number of issues. I also established an Introductory to Strategic Foresight course for 4th years at the university. Peter Bishop was a great help with that. I put that together and Peter met with me. He came to the university. He took on a roundtable with a number of professors and staff at the college, and then gave a complimentary lecture to sort of give some warning or give some advertisement to the fact that this course was going to start. Much like Alex's and also Jonathan, the course was tremendously successful. It was only an elective. It was run through the business faculty. And I had capacity. I had waiting lists each time. I only ran the course twice, but had capacity each time. I also presented the Foresight for post-secondary education and what it meant for UOIT at the time through Conference of Higher Learning that's published online. We've got other journal publications that I mentioned through SIMVAR and the Journal of Military Health Veterans Research on the future of mental health. And of course, Peter came in as a guest speaker and spent a day with us in the university, which was really appreciated and really well done. So these are the mechanisms that I use to try to anchor the program at UOIT. So I can tell you right now that their Futures Forum still exists. It exists under their Vice President Research, and it still exists there today. I do not work there. The course is still on the books, the Introductory to Strategic Forum. I haven't taught it in about 2 or 3 years there. The sad story here is that, about 6 months before the end of my term, quite unfortunately, the president, the provost, and the vice president research all left the university within 6 months. And a lot of acting people took over the positions. As a result of that, I wasn't able to actually sort of encourage or push an agenda to carry on with this. A number of other people were very vocal, taking priority about where the university should be going that. So it was just an unfortunate circumstance, I think, because all 3 people who were on board with the idea of strategic foresight actually left in a very, very quick period of time. And so, tongue in cheek, I kind of look at this as as a failure, the confessions of a failed strategic foresight practitioner in not actually getting the next extension to my contract, but or looking for that. But the program still is there. Unfortunately, I'm about 99% sure they do not have anybody in that or in the community understand it. So that's where it is right now. I'm teaching a foresight course at the master's level at Royal Military College online, and we use interactive Big Blue Button, it's called, for a lecture once a week, and it's it's a hybrid format, and it's really going military students, civilian students that are in the course, but it's going really quite well, and I'm teaching that currently. So I'm also running a project right now for the reserves. I'm a strategic advisor for the Chief of Reserves in the Canadian Armed Forces as a reservist now, and I'm doing a foresight project for them on integration. I've worked with Policy Horizons. I know a number of the analysts in there. And the other thing is for Jonathan, I just wanted to mention that I'm adding a component of a foresight to a program that's called Integrated Peace Building that's being taught in the Professional Development School at University of Ottawa. And I'm adding a half-day foresight project or foresight component to that course. Probably worth stopping in and having a chat. I know I've talked to Alex. We haven't connected yet. But I do intend to in the very near future. And so that's my story. Not as glamorous as some of the great stuff I've heard so far, but hopefully I've kept it under 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Michael. You did a good job. I apologize that we didn't have longer or more sufficient time for everyone. We tried to cram in a lot of presentations in this hour, which did start late. I would like to collect everyone's slides. If they can email them to me, I'll post them in the listserv. They can be emailed to paul@teachthefuture.org. I did put that in the chat. And I'm hoping that the Canadian colleagues can get connected. Some really powerful stuff there. We appreciate everyone for participating, listening in, and presenting. And we can also follow up in the Teach the Future Global listserv email area and take it from here. So with that, Peter needs to end the recording and head to the airport. So thank you. We'll sign off and hope to be in touch again very soon. Thank you.